I wore my black shirt just for you, Rich.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. It's like I'm agreeing with you because it's like subliminally you're wearing a black shirt.
Fair.
And I'm thinking that I'm talking to myself, and I always agree with myself. So
yeah,
it's like I'm looking in a mirror right now.
Really? Okay. I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah. Really?
Welcome to the show, where air takes the floor. Lee and Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by the head of the Center for Data Disease Control, Rich Swire. How you doing, bud?
Data disease. I like that. I want to patent that.
Data disease. You're gonna put that on a shirt as well?
Yeah. It's like virus, but more like, cooler. Sounds like you could charge money for curing it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's kind of what we do, I think, over here at Ray. Like we do have a lot of times where someone brings us a small infection and we're like, ooh, got to do a lot more work on that.
Data disease.
Yeah. Well, actually, it kind of goes into our topic today. We are going to dive into a little bit of a concept we've been throwing around and also hearing our customers talk a little bit more about as projects internally within organizations start to spread like a virus really quick. So people get excited about AI. It's fast moving, but it can be really dangerous without containment or a plan on how things are. So a lot of these projects for internal organizations, as they want to build versus buy, or they give a handful of people access to something and they say, go out there and start making something. Quickly, it can turn to like chaos, wasted spend, and burnout. So I figured today we'll kind of talk about why most AI projects fail before they start, and diving into this thought about like the spread of this virus. So let's go there. Let's talk a little bit first on how viruses start to spread. Maybe it's a lack of governance, or materials really aren't where they need to be. Even leaders see the hype, but the biggest problem they see is they're just getting pressured to do something, and then there's really no game plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think the general trend is that everybody is adopting AI at a minimal level, using tools like ChatGPT, and then as they start to think about how they apply that on their day-to-day, from the operations, or whether it be sales support, internal use cases where they want to deploy AI in a more meaningful manner, like deploying like AI agents or building out AI solutions. That's when it starts to get a little bit messy, right? Because obviously with ChatGPT, maybe there's a little bit of bleed there where you have a bunch of people swiping credit cards, and you wake up one day and the CFO looks at the credit card bill or all the expense reports, and he sees like 1,000 different people buying ChatGPT licenses. But that's a little bit easier to manage and somewhat confined, although there is concern about, what are they uploading into there, and is it being trained on it? And obviously all the security things that we've talked about in the past. But when you talk about actually taking that leap into building integration into AI models, and whatever hyperscaler you're on, Google, AWS, Microsoft, they all have frameworks where you can start building these AI solutions, and that's where it gets to be kind of the starting point of a little bit more of a chaotic kind of process to manage, because you kind of using the metaphor of a virus, and it's a good metaphor because what happens typically, especially in mid to large organizations, that you start to have many different teams start building different things, and they may not necessarily all be on the same page as far as best practices, what they're using, the tools. All developers are like clamoring to get after and building something with AI. And that's not a negative thing. It's just that when you start building things, especially prototypes or proof of concepts, there's a lot of things to consider when you want to actually go and scale and deploy. So I kind of put in 3 buckets of kind of things that you need to be concerned with when you're talking about deploying agentic solutions or AI solutions at scale within an enterprise. The first one is, you want to make sure that everybody is kind of, it can be centrally managed and monitored, right? So if Jim over in this division is building up some AI solutions, and just basically building out API connectors to different models and deploying some internal stuff, nobody really has visibility into what's going on. And most developers would just shortcut it and just build a direct interface into the AI, and they don't really care about tracking conversations. They don't care about tracking, hallucinations or any sort of anything else, right? Security compliance is not really in their scope of work. It's really just like, I'm just going to build this AI that communicates with this database and embrace the power of what AI can do. And that's the fascination with it. But really what you want is a centralized platform that everybody kind of agrees to go through, so that all things are being monitored, managed centrally. So, from a CTO or a CIO's perspective, or even from a legal perspective, they know that if they go to this one platform and they go in and they can grab the, whatever, if you have 10, 20, 100 agents, all the communications that are happening with AI models is happening within that platform, so that they can extract the logs, or they can obviously meet whatever standards they want to. But more importantly, it also, quite honestly, saves time and energy. So now your developers, whether there be 5 or 6 different teams are developing these solutions, they can all kind of have a leg up, because these platforms also typically give them all the key services that they need, so they don't have to go rebuild it, right? Because what happens is if your developers are conscious about that, then you have 5 or 6 different teams building these kind of core infrastructure parts, which you can just get out of the box with a platform. Number 2 would be cost management, because people may not necessarily feel it today, but models do cost money, and it's transactional, right? So as more and more people deploy these models and deploy applications on these models, in some cases these use cases could be exposed to thousands of users, which means token usage, right? And I use the analogy of having a 15-year-old daughter back in the day, when they would charge per minute on long distance phone calls, right? And then you wake up the next day to like a $800 phone bill, right? So
and spread that across an organization of 100 people, then at that point,
right? And you don't know what models they're using. You don't know if they're using deep research models, which are very expensive. And so this is not a fixed cost deployment. When you deploy AI, you want to manage that. So again, back to my original point, having a platform that everybody goes through, you can put limitations, you can put guardrails, and at a minimum, you could see your cost, right, of model usage. Otherwise, they're just swiping credit cards and sign up for API keys, and you might have 20 people over here developing on OpenAI, 20 people over here on Google, 20 people over here, and it just kind of, the cost starts to creep up. And there will be a point in time also that somebody is going to find a way to abuse that, right? What happens when you deploy an application and somebody comes in and doesn't necessarily have, maybe not even a malicious hacker or a bad actor, but they have access to a chat agent, and then they just start talking to it, on the internet, and some random person in Southeast Asia, and then they rack up your bill, right? So, and the developer just didn't think about that as an abuse case where they put a protection in place, right? So, cost is another component of this. So, usage is a good thing. So, I mean, if it's good usage, you don't mind paying the money, because you're basically automating tasks and you're doing work. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you don't want visibility and caps and some way of leveraging that.
One thing I want to touch on there too, because I think it's important. So we're at a phase now, I still think we're pretty early in a lot of how people are viewing AI, how they're deploying it. And that's why there's probably a big variance on how people use it. But the conflicting tools or platforms across departments that you're kind of touching on here, I think is huge. Obviously, the cost of just like letting it run wild, meaning, hey, well, we've got a handful of people that are all trying something, so let's see what sticks. I think we talked about on previous episodes, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and it's very much like, as soon as she spills glitter, there's going to be glitter everywhere until the end of time. Like you can't put it back in the jar. So having this cost potential where there's wasted money on overlapping tools, but also the lost time that happens of trying to clean this all up and initiatives stalling or needing to be rebuilt. I mean, all of this in the space of AI, as quickly as AI moves, you fall behind the 8 ball pretty fast when you don't have a game plan, or at least a safer space to start and have your team get comfortable with what your actual initiatives are.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me to my third point, which is, we're all familiar with the term tech debt, because, as software companies, you build software, and we're typically, once everything moved to SaaS, tech debt was probably, there was the mobile era, then there was kind of we moved to like frameworks that were a lot more responsive and a lot more kind of user friendly. But usually tech debt's like 5 to 10 years, right? So like 10 years, you're going to have to rewrite or at least update your code base, at a minimum, your user experience, to kind of be modernized, right? And software companies know about this because, they go, oh, I got to start rewriting my software because now it doesn't support this and this and this kind of user experience, and I got to be competitive. But you were usually on a 10-year kind of cycle. Well, with AI, there is a dramatic shift in how development is happening, not only in the stack, which we've talked about in previous episodes, where AI has kind of shifted the stack away from our traditional kind of lamp stack type of approach, introducing these LLM models and also introducing this human user interface, which is like the two, bookends to the stack. But more importantly, when you're talking about tech debt, now tech debt's happening much quicker. So, and it's only going to get shorter and shorter. So the half-life of your software has gone from 10 years probably to 3 with AI, and maybe in 3 to 4 years with codification, basically AI moving into coding. So it's probably going to be like down to a year. Now, if you were just to look at the lower part of the stack, the models are actually changing dramatically every 6 months. So this brings me to my third point about managing and understanding what if you're going off and doing these disparate projects and everybody's kind of coding this from ground up, and this DIY mentality, which is a very, it's a luring way. Everybody wants to get so excited. Let's go start building stuff. But the reality is what you're going to ultimately find yourself in is that you're going to be locked in to this kind of hard-coded, and building out these applications. And when you're going live, you're going to wake up the next day and go, man, I'm not even supporting the latest models. I'm not even, and what I've built here isn't something I could share across my organization because I've kind of isolated in my own kind of little development environment. And, this is another reason why you want to abstract and build these platforms. And platform is a word that a lot of people kind of misconstrue when it comes to AI. I mean, when we hear platform from a software perspective, it means something different, but it kind of has the same correlated value proposition in the AI world. But when we talk about a platform for AI, what we really mean is abstracting the things that are going to be ever changing and moving quickly, right? Every day a new model comes out, every day a new tool or a service that AI supports, new standards like MCP, like Kodak, all these different things that are coming into this world that that are playing a very key part in how AI behaves, but are somewhat abstracted from the actual application. It's so much easier when you embrace from a platform perspective. So like in our platform, for example, let's say you start building something on GPT 4.0 today, and then in 3-4 months, you want to move it to GPT 5 or whatever, or maybe in some other new model that they might release. If you have a platform that's abstracted that, it's as simple as just changing a setting in your agent, right? But if you've hard coded these things, then you're going to have to kind of go, oh, okay, man, I gotta, now I've got to go in and actually change and hard code and change the code. Now, most developers out there would be saying like, oh, what's the big deal, Rich? Changing a model is not that hard to do. However, I'll make a bigger point. So, for example, OpenAI last year, they announced, oh, we have this new API architecture for what they called assistants, right? And we leveraged it. When a lot of people built software around leveraging this new API because it was their more advanced API that allowed agents to have access to documents easier and so forth. But 3 months ago, they said, hey, we're going to get rid of that.
Sunset.
Yeah. So it's like, that's unheard of. To release a pretty significant part of your API, have developers come in droves and start building on it, and then say, yeah, we're going to actually get rid of it next year. So it's like it had a lifespan of like less than 24 months, right? But that goes back to my point. Now, everybody who's built on that, everybody, it could be thousands of people, and internally in your company, if you've got people building on that, and we actually had a call yesterday with a company that actually built off of that, and I asked them the question, but I don't think they wanted to answer it. But I was like, now, hey, you guys are going to have to rip that apart now.
How does that make you feel?
and move it to the responses API. So whereas that's abstracted, in a platform, if the ground moves, then the platform adjusts, right? Versus having to worry about that product by product by product, agent by agent by agent. So those are really the three things that you have to consider. And they all just kind of overwhelmingly say like, yeah, we can't let people go off in 5 different directions. And I'm all about innovation and I'm all about empowerment, but you do have to at some point say, guys, this is a benefit for us to work off the same sheet of music. And not only does it meet compliance, security for our CIO, CISO, it also make sure that we stay within budget, especially usage, where our CFO, and also allows us to not have to find ourselves supporting what you're building and pulling you away from developing new stuff and innovating. Because what happens as a developer, and this is the classic conundrum that developers find themselves in, is that they start building something and they're super excited about it. Like that's the funnest part, building, launching it. And then you get users.
And then you got to support it.
Then users start going, hey, we like this feature. We want this feature. And maybe that excitement still oh, yeah, cool. They're using it. I'm going to add more features. And then months go by and they're like,
at some point,
hey, this isn't working. That's not working. Hey, I need you to support this new model. Hey, it's not doing this. Hey, there's a new thing. And you're like, and then you're kind of like, oh, now I feel like I'm a support engineer.
Yeah, you're not a creator anymore.
Yeah. And then now you're like, oh, do I really want to deal with this like low level stuff? And then now you're stuck, in that rut.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of our pitch to a lot of developers is like, listen, we're not taking away the power for you to innovate and build.
100%.
In fact, we want your time to be focused on everything above the water. We call it the iceberg effect. We'll take care of everything below the water, the massive amount of work that's required to do the boring stuff. And you focus on what everybody's kind of seeing off and doing the ooh and ahhing when they see an iceberg, like how beautiful that iceberg is. Like focus on your company's, specific applications, building out more and more agents, giving those things, empowering those things with specific functionality that's proprietary to you. But don't worry about all the other crap that is below the water that we do.
100%. And I think too, in a lot of businesses and a lot of conversations that we have just in general, this idea around not having a clear KPI on what success is for the project is somewhat twofold, right? You've got the back end, like you said, the developer whose success for them is taking the concept, spinning up some software and saying, here you go, I built this for you. And although it might be exciting for them or just something the team needed, like that's kind of the stopgap for them. We got to the point, we're good. But internally, when the success is measured more so by what is actually being done work-wise and something shifts and changes, and now there becomes some skepticism when a project isn't delivering as they thought it would. Maybe, again, whatever they've built and hard-coded changes as far as how the LLMs are interacting with it, or they've just took on a project that was way too vast. So there's so much around what is successful AI deployment is, and it's not just as simple as I wanted to build X, we built X, high fives, pizza party for everybody. It really needs to be something that almost evolves and iterates, that once it hits a successful measure, then they say, okay, what else can we do with what we've built now? Yeah. Because that's how you really compound it and you drive the actual value of that solution much higher than just building point solutions.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's like multiple failure points when deploying an AI agentic solution that kind of exist when you're deploying software, but not really. It's a little bit different. We're flipping the script on quite a bit, right? The first place where failure happens is you think of it like it's software, like you're building something that's going to have a UX and it's deterministic. And we're going to kind of go in and have a couple scope and blueprint meetings, but then the developers for the most part can go off and do it. And they have very little interaction with the business, folks and the domain experts until the end, until they get to testing. And in the AI world, it's actually the opposite. Mm-hmm. It really should start with the business user. It's really kind of talking to somebody who's actually in the workflow. Yeah.
Because they're going to be the champions of it, and they're going to be the ones steering everything as well.
Exactly. And also what you're building is you're building a human replacement. You're building, and I don't mean by that like jobs. I mean by you're building something that has to act like a human for the most part. Because that's what AI is.
It's augmenting current workforce, but it at some point becomes a part of the team.
So you're taking a workflow and you're going to somebody and saying, all right, what part of your workflow can we help automate? And it could be a significant part of what they do on a day-to-day basis. It could be stuff that they don't want to do anymore. But long story short, there's nuance in there that is lost in code. It's really and it's caught in the AI training and the model itself. So if you don't do a good job of understanding the business process and understanding what the input is and what the outcome should be, you're pretty much off on the wrong direction on day one because you don't have the training. You're not collecting the data and the workflow and the conceptual kind of value proposition of what it needs to deliver. And so from a developer perspective, you're working off a blank sheet of paper, so you don't have no direction of what it needs to do, right? you understand what the API calls to the AI are.
Yeah.
You know how to send a prompt. You know how to do all the basic stuff. I mean, everybody knows how to do the basic stuff. The hard part is most developers just don't understand business, and they don't understand, and they don't walk in the shoes of the people who are running the business.
That's a great point.
And so they don't really, it's not like they're sitting there and they go, oh, I know that there's all these different things that happen when a support ticket comes into the support team.
Yeah.
They're using
they know
software,
the technical
right?
triggers that take place, but they don't actually know what the workforce is
There's
doing to make that happen.
There's a lot that lives in the ether before it ends up in the software. And you can take that example to sales as like, well,
any position.
If you log onto somebody's HubSpot, it doesn't tell you anything about how they sell, what they sell, how those people end up getting into HubSpot as far as a customer. No, all you know is like, oh, they talk to 5 people, but I have no idea all the work that happens outside of this.
They put in a 2-sentence note about what that was, just so it triggers that person's memory.
All the things that happen that an AI would have to know in order for it to be effective.
Yeah.
So that's number one. That's a failure point. Number 2 failure point is AI is hard. You know, we talked about this on our last last episode, is that, you know, it's not as simple as upload a few documents into some sort of, AI vector store or model and give it a prompt and say, all right, go do it. It's just not that simple, right? It is, it's art and science, and it requires practice, and it requires knowledge and expertise and experience to basically say, all right, I know how to tame this lion. You know, there was an article this morning that I think was prompted by maybe an interview that Sam Altman was doing. And all these engineers that are working at the forefront of this are basically saying like, yeah, we don't even know really. We know less and less as we do more and more on how this thing thinks and how it operates.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is another point of like, developers are not AI develop. Just because you're a developer doesn't necessarily mean like you can put on your AI hat and go, oh, just because you know how to do an API.
But that's not a knock on them either, right? I mean, you've been a developer your entire life, and there's lanes that people get into that they're extremely well equipped for, and it doesn't mean you don't know other things, but why move away from your specialty if it's just so you can put one more thing on your plate,
or just understand that it's going to take a long time for you to learn it. You have to you can't just pick out 3 developers in your team and go, okay, you guys are the AI guys now. Go build this in 3 months.
Yep.
They have to build stuff. They have to try it. They have to test it. I mean, they have to do it for years. I mean, that's what we've been doing for years. Everybody has to split. There's a non-zero amount of time. You could be a 30-year developer. And when I started building out Gen AI solutions, I felt like I was like starting over again because, it's so new, it's so different, right? And the final failure point, and it kind of parlays off what you were saying, is what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve? And a lot of times, people just don't understand what AI is really good at, and they also don't understand how they've not deployed enough AI solutions to know where there's a higher failure rate or more of a complexity at stake, right?
So, or better efficacy or anything.
So the failure point sometimes is either biting off more than you can chew, right? Trying to eat the whole elephant, or it could be that you choose the wrong models. You choose, it could be some very simple thing.
Just a lack of understanding.
Like I say it all the time. Like people are like, I really like, the first question some people ask us, and you can, this is a guaranteed tell of like somebody who's never built AI solutions, is like, well, we want to be able to switch between models of Gemini and Claude, and you're like, and then you go, well, why, right? Like, what is there a reason for that? And there are reasons potentially. But if you're just talking about like a support use case, right?
But 95% of the people that say that.
Why do you care about that stuff?
Exactly.
Like, why is that important? Are you going to do it real time? Like, you're going to switch it? You wouldn't do that. It doesn't make any sense to do that, right?
That's like having someone leading a conversation and then being like, all right, you're talking to Jim. And then as soon as they say something else, they're like, well, now you're talking to Sally. And they're just like, okay, well, why?
Yeah. And also they don't understand the nuance of training against a model. Like, once you've trained an AI against a model, there's a certain connection that's made there. And if you're just going to willy-nilly switch to another model, even if it's in the same family, like switching from, OpenAI 4.0 to 03 is a dramatic shift. You would not do that. It would be like saying, if I was to build an application, I would say something like, well, I want to be able to switch between PHP and JavaScript. It just doesn't make sense. It's like a weird thing to say.
Right.
But I get it. These are people that are using these different systems from a ChatGPT, Gemini interface, like a user experience that, oh, I kind of like the way Claude writes better than I like the way Gemini writes. And I get
Sure.
that part. But when you're building out an agent, these are not necessarily things that are like top of mind requirements out the gate.
Right.
Now, down the road, you might discover like, well, we might use Gemini for different use cases and so forth.
Yeah.
But the point there is like a lot of times people kind of just get wired in on what they want to use, or they lock in on a specific tool. They're like, well, I've got to use this specific framework or this specific model because that's what's been approved by corporate, or that's what's been authorized. And the problem is like the minute you handcuff yourself there and not be able to really have the ability to choose the right tool for the right job could add to that failure rate. And you'll notice that all the failure that typically happens in an AI project, I don't think it at all ever depends necessarily on the ability to develop code. That's actually probably, honestly, one of the easiest things, because quite honestly, a lot of people, and ourselves included, are using AI to generate the code. So we're moving away from if you were to say what's the biggest risk on deploying an application or software 5 years ago, I would say code, like the developer.
Sure.
If the developer sucks and they are not a good architect and they don't know what they're doing, you're going to get into a horrible death spiral of years and years and years. You're going to run out of money and you're not going to launch.
Yeah.
Today, that risk profile is dramatically shifted toward, if you don't really have a domain expert who understands the business process, who can clearly define where the gaps are and where they could close those gaps and find real clear ROI on lift and save time and compress time and communicate that workflow to an AI, not even to a developer, to an AI. So the AI could communicate that to the developer, and or AI could build it. That is the most valuable person in your company now. So if you're sitting there as a CEO or a CIO and you're going, all right, guys, we're kind of stuck in the mud here. What are we going to do with AI? You need to find your best domain experts in each one of your divisions of your business, bring them into a room and help and let them define what AI is going to do for their business unit. I use this analogy all the time, is if you could hire 1,000 people today and it costs you no money,
what would you put them to
so
work
basically
doing?
Infinite capacity. And they started walking into your office. Hi, my name's Jim. You just hired me. I've got a PhD. I can do whatever you want me to do. I just need some training and I needed some logins. What do you want me to do? And that's literally what, that's it. And then the next guy walks in. Hey, my name's Sally. I got a PhD. I can do whatever you want me to do. I just need some training and some logins.
Yep.
And then just boom, 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 boom. Right. And then put that into a plan and start executing.
Yeah.
And then obviously the whole point of the show is to talk more about like, okay, and once you're ready, and this is where Rhea and obviously where we spend a lot of our time. I just told you have 1,000 employees. Think about how hard it's going to manage that. Yeah. How are you going to remember after you've met with all 1,000 of them and told them, you do this, you do that, you do this. How are you going to manage all of them? Where are you going to make sure that you can monitor all of them and make sure that they're all singing off the same sheet of music and they all have access to the same tools, and that whatever access you've given to whatever applications is all monitored, managed, and controlled in one singular environment. And you have a platform that makes it super easy for you to log in every morning and go, I've got 1,000 employees now, and they're doing 1,000 different things. How is it doing? How's it going? And I want to manage all that in one singular place. Yeah. And obviously that's what we built.
Absolutely. And one thing to leave it off on before we do the sign off here, I think one point that you're touching on too is the reason that bringing in a third party to have some of these discussions is not to, completely annex the development team that you've been using or that you have in-house that has been leading all of these projects. It's the fact that the specialization around AI is a blend, and it's more of an art than just simply coding and doing it. So having the domain experts, meaning the team members that are saying, these are the roles we wish we could fill, having the tech experts, your dev team internally that says, great, we've got these documentations, this resource, all of the stuff in front of house and back of house from like a restaurant analogy. And then you've got the expo line, someone like us that can sit there and say, okay, great, I need, these plates taken to table 3 and I need you to fire this many steaks. And like having the ability to have an orchestrator like us operate in that intermediary space means that projects are more successful and happen at a faster rate without resources or anybody feeling like they're falling behind.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is also like the practical component of this is, it's not like AI engineers are out there holding signs that says, work for food, right?
No, they're getting millions of dollars of bonuses right now.
Yeah. So
that's what's happening.
So Number one, good luck hiring an AI. Anybody who has any sort of expertise of AI, because they're all
Scooped
flying
up quick.
They're all flying to the valley and getting big paychecks. But more importantly, is that when you're talking about building out, it even emphasizes this more importantly, is like you're going to want to turn your current resources into your most valuable resources when it comes to your projects regarding AI, because that's the business expertise, that's the domain expertise, and lever companies like us and others that are experts as needed. But ultimately that can transition very easily into your team, and that's another reason why we obviously our platform is so easy to learn and how to use, and our goal is to we built our platform more for the business user, because we think that's the future developer, right? The people who know how the world works, how the company works, how their process works is actually going to be the developer of the 21st century. And it's with these kind of zero code, low code environments that they can do that in a safe and powerful manner is really going to give every company a leg up.
Absolutely, man. Well, great stuff today. And for everyone listening, thanks again for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue this discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Welcome to the show, where air takes the flow.